Do you want ideas for using your 6x8 paper without making scraps? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have 6x8 paper busting template number 15, and that means there are 14 other ones that show you how to take 6x8 paper and make A2 size cards without scraps. In this case, it's one piece of paper making 2 cards. There's also many other sizes, so if 6x8 is not for you, but you've stumbled upon this video, there are templates for 6x6 or 12x12 paper for A2 size cards, but also 5x7 cards and slimline cards and a whole variety at JessCrafts.com. This will be the first link in the video description to where you can go and download your own copy of the template. It may look familiar because it is pretty similar to sketches 13 and 14, but I'm showing you some variations on an idea as it is the easier to kind of show you explicitly how to cut the paper. Some people really appreciate that. And also it was similar to an idea shared at SBC Fest, which is from scrapbook.com. They are having a new SBC Fest soon, and it's a free event, free forever. And well, as of now, they've never made you purchase it later. It's not like free for the weekend. You can go back and watch the old SBC Fests. And so you can watch my class and I can link you to that. But also there's a new one coming up in September, and there's a bunch of really great teachers. They kind of mix it up every time for some smaller YouTubers like myself, and then some really big names in the craft industry like Vicky Booten and Simon Hurley and Diane Reevely, things like that. Anyway, let's take a look at today's paper pad. I have the Cozy collection from scrapbook.com. It has some fall papers, but it's not exclusively fall. Like, there's plenty of things you can use outside of the fall season, which I like, but I did recently use this paper pad, and I like to use the same paper pad a few times so that you can see more than one idea from it before I move on. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my 6x8 piece of paper and cut it in half at 4. So it's a 4x6 piece of paper. Then I'm going to cut 3/4 of an inch off of it. So my main piece here is 4x5 1/4. This means when I go to make my card, there's not going to be much room for a mat. You could probably do an 1/8 inch mat if you really want to. I'm going to skip that today. I'm also probably not going to choose a piece of paper that's mostly white to put on a white card base. In fact, you may find that you don't like the way these two look together, then choose a colored card base to kind of make your pattern paper stand out a bit. One of the reasons that I wanted to show this sketch versus sketches 13 and 14 is this allows you to use the paper from 6x8 pattern papers that are directional, that they have a clear top and bottom. With 6x8 pattern paper packs, I usually find that the top of the paper is going to be here where the seam is, and so I've come up with plenty of sketches that don't work when you have to turn everything on its side. So 13 and 14, I wouldn't be able to use this house paper, or this side of the house paper. Now most of them are double-sided. So in this case, when I go to put this strip along the edge here, this is going to be okay, because even though this is semi-directional pattern paper, it's actually not super directional. But like this house paper, if I were to turn the other strip that comes off of it on its side, then the houses are going to be on their side. Because it's double-sided, usually one side isn't, and you can take advantage of that. But I wanted to show you something where like the main focal point could be that pretty paper that has a clear top and bottom, in case that's what you have in your collection. Okay, so now I have the 3/4 of an inch and the 4x5 1/4. But I need this 3/4 of an inch piece to stretch across the card. To do that, I am going to cut it part way. I gave you measurements for this. You can adjust it if it matters to your sketch, like what the size of the die cut you take out of it. So in this case, I'm going to cut it to 1 1/4. You don't really have to worry about these measurements because it is in that free download that you get. It tells you exactly all those measurements. The other side of this paper is actually really bold in comparison. It has this orange background. And as you can see now, I had to do something to fill this gap. So here's where the next part of the sketch comes into play. It tells you to cut a shape. I say about a 2 inch by 2 inch shape. I show you a circle because it's like the easiest thing to do on the design program, but you can do whatever shape you want. Today I'm going to pick hexagons. This is actually going to be my smaller hexagons. This is what I'm going to cut out of the pattern paper. I want to cut it out of the other side, because this is the side of the hexagon I'm going to use. When I cut it out, I'm not going to use the pumpkin side because I want it to stand out. So I'm going to instead flip it to the hexagon side, or sorry, the orange side. I'm recovering a little bit still from a cold, so I'm like not 100%, and I apologize for my voice and the fact that I might sound a little bit, I may make a few more mistakes than normal. That's the brain fog happening there. So I'm going to die cut it from this side, and I'm going to die cut it in approximately the place I want it to be on the final card. Now, I'm about to make a mistake here, because if I flip this over, now my hole is actually going to be on the left side of the card, and I kind of want it to be on the right side. It's not a big deal. I could totally do it if I made that mistake, but I need to put it on the opposite side of the paper as well. And so now when it cuts it through, it'll cut the hole on this side. I think if I just turned it over. Yeah, I think the brain fog's getting me real good today here, guys. But then most of these pumpkins would look upside down. So I don't know, I'm just trying to kind of talk you through it and walk you through making sure that you do it correctly. So think about it. Once it's cut out, is the hole gonna be where you are expecting it to be? Because your paper, it might matter more if your paper particularly is super directional. So I have my shape out of there, and I really do like to cut it on the side that is going to be facing forward, because sometimes, and I'll see if it can catch the camera, but like there's a little indent from the die, and so I like that to be on the like finished side. I like it to look like it's not the back side of the die. Now, with this strip across the bottom, you could either put a mat or not. In the sketch, I do suggest a mat, and I give you sizes. If you decide not to do the mat, then you don't care what the measurements are, but if I don't put the measurements and then you decide you want one, it would be helpful to have them. Now, what I could do here is actually just fit this right on top if you didn't want to be adding any mats at all. Unfortunately, I don't think that really looks great. I think you kind of need something to break up these two pieces of the same paper being next to each other, so I'm gonna go with a mat. I still have the Violet Studio Fall into Autumn metallic paper on my desk, so I'm probably going to make use of that again here today. It's again about showing you like more than one idea for, although this is the same thing I did with it last time, but just like using the same paper a couple of times. I think sometimes there's a feeling that like everyone's always on to the next thing, and you're like, but wait, I just got that in the mail, and they maybe are already working on something else. So I try to fight against that a little bit, especially when I can, like when I, have time and I don't have a bunch of things that like are pressing, oh, I need to work on this or that, to go back to the same thing. So I'm going to put a strip of washi tape across this as well, just because again, it's out on my desk. I know this is nothing new. I've been putting little strips of washi tape on a bunch of cards recently, although I have a thought. I could take, so last time I used this plaid along a solid piece of the bottom, and I liked how that looked. But in order to break this up even further, I was like, what if I put the plaid down? You can still see the flowers through it, which is kind of cool. It makes it like there's almost another pattern going on, and it'll bring in a little bit more contrast from these two. Then I can layer even more on top. And again, this is nothing, fancy or innovative, but just looking for an opportunity to use a few more supplies. And I'll put that other layer of washi on top of that. And they're all a little bit translucent, so you can see through them still a bit. And then I want to add my sentiment here. Keeping with using the same thing repeatedly, I have the scrapbook.com Fall Sampler stamp set, which I recently used. I am not a huge fan of stamping on pattern paper, but this particular stamp is a solid stamp mostly, and so I think it'll work okay. Normally I would use my MISTI magnets, but occasionally I actually don't think they're the best call, because with a shape like this, if it shifts, it's a little harder to know that I got it back into the same exact spot. So I want to reduce the chances of it shifting, and therefore I'm going to use the tape instead. Oops, I did not center that. Okay, so this is kind of the bummer about when you're stamping directly onto your pattern paper, which is one of the reasons it's not my favorite thing to do, is that if I've messed up this sheet, it's kind of not anything I can do about that because I can't cut a new one from this pattern paper. Obviously, I'd go back into the collection and find another one. What I could do is stamp this on a circle, but that's really not going to help because then unless I put a border around it, it's not going to be, I'm not going to be able to recenter it because when I cut it out perfectly and shift the circle over to make it centered, then you're still going to see this underneath. So we're going to kind of come up with another way. But let's finish stamping. Let's make sure it's nice and dark. That is why I use my MISTI, because especially with solid stamps, I feel like I have to give it several presses. I think the sentiment is very readable. I'm a little bummed that it's off center, like it's off a little too much to the left and even slightly crooked. It's the nature of stamping though. Like you can totally leave this. It's fine. I don't think you have to fix it. But I do want to offer a suggestion for what I would do to kind of balance it out. And that's probably come in with an embellishment in this corner so that it's less obvious that there's more room here than there is here. I thought about this leaf because it's also from the Falling into Autumn set, which is still on my desk, and I need to find something that's like not overwhelming in size, but it's about the right, like covers a good portion of this to trick the eye without, you know, being so big that it has to like cover the sentiment or something. There's not really any of this blue. I think technically that tape is supposed to be about that blue color, but it doesn't quite look right. There are these other little leaves which they blend too much in. And this is like where the dilemma is going to be. Is like I did not think about having a matching embellishment before I started because I did not necessarily plan to put an embellishment here. That leaf could work. Kind of blends in, but I think it's okay. If I can't find anything else, I think that's my choice. When I say when it blends in, I just mean that like, well, you can certainly see it because it's like a light tan on orange. There's so much of this sort of light tannish color in the background that it doesn't really pop. That's probably going to be pretty true for any of these wooden embellishments though. I did use up all of the pumpkins already, which would have been pretty perfect for this. I think the mushrooms do okay. They don't cover up as much of that, but they do kind of just distract your eye a little bit. So I think the leaf's going to be the answer. For this one, I think you could add a little bit more interest on top of it too and reincorporate a color like the orange by putting a gem over this hole, although that'd be quite a large gem, or taking a little scrap of this paper and letting it pop through. So in like taping that to the back so that instead of seeing, because like when, depending on where you position it, you could see quite a few different layers going on underneath. To kind of neutralize it, I would put a little scrap underneath it. I decided to go with the flower. I felt like it kind of hit most of my requirements, but maybe I should have popped it up on foam tape a little bit because it's kind of on this large, like this higher layer and this lower layer right now, but I just put some really strong Barely Art adhesive, and then I'm going to put a glass block on top of it and put it to the side, and hopefully that will cause it to dry well. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video!